Hi, Karina. How are you?
I'm doing well, Shaila. Thanks so much for having me on.
Of course, I am so happy to be speaking with you about all this. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell me a little bit about the Cougar Conservancy?
Well, my name is Karina Domingo, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. And I'm a wildlife biologist and science communicator living in Los Angeles, California. And if you have listeners tuning in from other places, that's in the United States. Um, but throughout the years, I've worked on a variety of different wildlife projects with some really incredible species. So when I received my bachelor's of science from Humboldt State University in wildlife management and conservation biology, I was living in the redwoods going to school, and I had the opportunity to work on projects with species like black bears and mountain lions and North American porcupines and river otters. And so, really, I just love wildlife. But as you mentioned, I'm also the founder and director of the Cougar Conservancy, and we're a nonprofit with a mission to reduce human wildlife conflict and conserve cougar populations through science based management and conservation.
That's amazing. Yes, I love wildlife. I've been to Yellowstone twice, actually, and I just think it's so, so fun. I love seeing the bears and the bison, all of it. Yeah.
Yellowstone is incredible. The first time I went to Yellowstone, I was able to see there was two bison kills. So there was two bisons on the ground, and I watched as a wolf pack and multiple grizzly bears sort of fought over this kill site. And so, as a person who grew up in Los Angeles, to see that for my first time in like my early 20s, my mind was blown. So I'm glad to hear that you love Yellowstone just as much as I do.
Oh my goodness, that's actually really cool because that doesn't always happen. Like tourists don't usually come across that, so.
Right.
Can you explain to me what type of science field you are in and what work you do on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, I think I'd like to speak more so to the first question, but I can speak to the second one as well. The type of science field that I'm specifically in within the STEM realm, right? Science, technology, engineering, mathematics. I guess you would call me the S. Within the sciences, there's the biological sciences, which is what I have my associate's degree in. And then within the biological sciences, along with intersecting with a lot of other type of disciplines, is wildlife management and conservation biology. And so I deal specifically with wildlife, but some of my training does include the classic genetics, chemistry, molecular biology, that sort of stuff. But after I transferred to university, I started taking classes that were very specific for wildlife taxonomic groups, wildlife policy, and wildlife management sort of classes.
I love that. Yeah. Thank you for like explaining that because I know a lot of people aren't familiar with the types of sciences that there are. Yeah. What drew you to cougars and animals in general? Like, have you always loved animals?
Yes, the short answer is yes, and I'll try to keep this one short, but I think it's important to kind of really be honest about our passions and where they come from. So I'll be candid and say that I've loved animals since I was a young child. And when I was young, I was born in the 90s. And of course, like many other children, I was obsessed with The Lion King and Steve Irwin. So both of those things were very popular at the time. And I'd make home movies talking in an accent about animals because I wanted to be like Steve. And when I was in elementary school, I used to tell teachers, I remember this, that I wanted to be a marine biologist. But as I got older, I veered away from those passions, and I did work eventually in other fields. I was a makeup artist and a hairstylist after high school before actually coming back to wildlife conservation. And what drew me to cougars specifically is I was at the San Diego Zoo when I had this aha moment of, oh my goodness, like I need to get into wildlife conservation and be part of this solution, was when I met a snow leopard there. And I learned about the habitat loss and climate change on the little plaque. And I also learned about what's called retaliatory killings, or when a snow leopard is killed for killing somebody's livestock. So I learned about these human wildlife conflict issues or human wildlife interactions. And then I always thought, I enrolled in community college after that and started my academic journey of getting to where I wanted to go, which was to work to save animals that were threatened with extinction. And I always thought that I'd go off and work towards the conservation of African lions or snow leopards. But I learned about our local cougars, mountain lions, puma, whatever you want to call them. They have many common names, but we're talking about Puma concolor, scientific name. And I read a book on our local cougars and learned about the issues. And from there, I realized that I could make a difference in my own backyard, in my own home country, in my own home state. And that's how I decided to get specifically into the conservation of cougars.
Wow, yeah, taking your experiences and putting them to action, that's amazing.
Thank you.
I know you were part of a historical event revolving around cougars that actually took place a couple days ago. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yes, we are so excited about this. So back in September, the Cougar Conservancy has a conflict task force, and we received communication from a resident living in the San Gabriel Mountains in the Monrovia area. And for those not aware, this is in the Southern California area, just outside of Los Angeles. And the report from the resident was that a cougar was on their property, and Gary is his name. He said that the cougar was potentially injured from the nearby bobcat wildfire, which was very close to his house. And so the next morning, what we did is we went out to Gary's property, and our conflict task force, assessed the situation. So we did a walkthrough of the property, and we were able to confirm the presence of a cougar that was on site. And yes, Gary was right. It probably had injuries based on what we saw. And so we coordinated with wildlife officials here in California. They're called the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. And they came out and helped chemically immobilize and capture the animal. And once she was in hand, we were able to actually, really look at her and figure out what was wrong with her. Why wasn't she walking okay? And unfortunately, we determined that all four paws were severely burned and bleeding. And so she was a victim from the local wildfire, and she was immediately taken into the Wildlife Investigations Lab, which is up in Sacramento. So she did a 6-hour drive after being captured, and she was about to really be in the hands of some of the best veterinarians in the state. And what they did is they treated her with a variety of different burn treatments in order to heal her paws, which included these innovative tilapia skin bandages. So they take fish skin and they sanitize it, completely sanitize it, so it doesn't smell like fish or anything like that, but it has these healing properties because there's collagen in the fish skins. And so what they do is they sewed on these tilapia skin bandages, and in between treatments, they also did some fancy stuff with infrared laser treatment to the affected tissue to ensure that there was no infection. And they did this multiple times because, like, if you have a cat at home, you know that cats do not like anything on their paws, right? And so she would rip them off after about 2 or so hours, but it was worth it. If the tilapia skins were on for even just a few hours, it would really make a difference with her treatment. So long story short, veterinarians did these burn treatments, but they also did something really crucial, which is to correct her dehydration and ensure that she was getting adequate nutrition. And they're doing this all while controlling her pain through a variety of medications, because if you've ever burned your hand on the stove or on a hot bowl, you know how badly painful a burn is. And so you can only imagine, what kind of pain she was in. So they were also treating her for her pain. And eventually, after about a month of being in captivity, she was recently released into the close nearby the area we had originally rescued her from. And so, so that's kind of like the short end of the story. But this is the first time the California Department of Fish and Wildlife have ever rescued, rehabilitated, responded and released a cougar in the state of California as part of this wildlife disaster network. And so let me say just 1 second what that is. And so this year, the wildfires in California have been raging, and it's been the biggest wildfire year that we've had in a very long time. And so they've had bears come in and foxes and coyotes and all of these animals coming in that were very burned all throughout the state. And so what they're doing now is they're taking a statewide approach of figuring out how does the department deal with these incidents in the future, especially since wildfire seasons are only going to continue to get worse, especially with climate change. And so they created this new disaster network in order to be able to quickly respond to incidents such as these in the future. And she was the first animal released as part of, these efforts, besides another bear that was released a few weeks prior to her.
That's absolutely amazing. Wow. That's such a cool story to hear, and you should be very proud.
Thank you. And since this is a podcast on women and empowering women and teen girls, it should be said and kind of shouted out that my team that responded, it was myself and Joanna Turner, our advisory committee member. So two women responded and actually initially found the lion, and two of the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, 2 out of 3 of them were women who also responded to the scene. And then most of the veterinarians who were helping her recovery while she was being rehabilitated was mainly all women on the team as well. So girl power on that one.
Wow, yes, I definitely did want to mention that. Why do you hope to encourage women in STEM?
Well, I think it's really important when we talk about DEAI work, or diversity, equity, access, and inclusion work, that we go really beyond talking about just gender equity. So I think it's really important, when we talk about, women in STEM, that we also amplify BIPOC voices, or Black, Indigenous, people of color voices. So young people, scientists, students, naturalists. And obviously there are other social identities that intersect with gender, like race and class and sexuality and immigration status and disability. But we really need to work together across these identities to come together, and not just to recruit new people in the STEM field, but also uplift these communities in every way possible within society, and with the understanding that we're operating in a white supremacy culture. And so we really have a lot to learn and unlearn, but I think that it's really important that people see themselves as a scientist. And so for me, my role model was Steve Irwin, and I didn't really have a woman scientist to really look up to at the time. And so I'm glad that women are becoming more prevalent in the STEM field, but we definitely have a long way to go as well to make it more equitable for all people as well.
Everything you said is very, very true. And I'm so glad I had you on today to showcase a woman in STEM. And then also, you are very well spoken, and I loved all the points that you came across.
Thank you so much, Shaila. And I hope that you have so much success with your podcast and you're able to reach a broad audience. And I just think it's so inspiring to see you as a young person out there doing it. So congratulations on your podcast, and thanks again for having me.